Welcome to the Disability News Report. I'm your host, Jennifer Price. This is the channel where we are changing the narrative of mainstream and popular topics and conversations by intentionally including people with disabilities. The topic I'm talking about today is ableism. Now, ableism is a topic that can be specific to people with disabilities, and many people, especially in the disability community, might know what ableism is. Today, I'm going to be talking with Leslie Zukor, who is my guest today. She writes extensively on the topic of ableism on her page on The Mighty. But what I'm specifically going to delve into is not necessarily ableism from the perspective of the issues that people with disabilities have with non-disabled people, because that tends to be where the discussion goes, how a non-disabled person is behaving, is being ableistic or behaving in some sort of ableism fashion by saying or doing something. We're going to talk about what it is if you're not sure exactly what the definition of ableism is and you're engaging in it. But what I'm also going to be talking about is how it can show up in people with disabilities and how even people with disabilities can engage in ableism. This is a subject that Leslie discusses at length in her columns or her articles for The Mighty. And she is a fierce healthcare advocate as well. So we're going to get into a little bit of healthcare advocacy as it also relates to ableism. That is the topic for this week. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, certainly hit the notifications button so that you know when the next episode comes out. And please feel free to comment, especially if you've had an experience with ableism, whether it's from another person with disability or a non-disabled person, or if you yourself have engaged in ableism, regardless of whether you have a disability. I'm curious to hear about it, and I'm curious to talk about it. We will be discussing it also on Facebook. That interview with Leslie is coming up now. Hi, and welcome back to the show. I'm here with Leslie Zukor, a disability rights and healthcare activist. Leslie, thanks for coming to the show today.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah, so I would like to just start back at the beginning of your trajectory getting here. I read that you thought that you were going to go into academia, went to Wellesley College with those goals, and then your life took a detour and you ended up, being where you are now. So if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about your background and your trajectory to becoming a disability rights and healthcare activist.
Yeah, I started off at Wellesley College, and I thought the accommodations weren't optimal. I mean, I knew I needed accommodations around my migraines and everything, but I found that Wellesley was not the most supportive environment. A lot of people were really motivated and into their careers, which is fine. But looking back on it, the disability accommodations that I had at Wellesley were a lot better than the accommodations I had at the school where I ended up getting my degree, which is Reed College. So what happened at Wellesley was that I was trying to get ahead a little bit by taking some summer courses. I think, one course behind. I was going to take 2 summer courses. And what happened is I ended up, due to a medication, having a breakdown, and it was handled, what was supposed to be, I'm assuming, a wellness check on me, ended up being so severely botched by the police that were there. They tried to bust me for drugs because I was disoriented, and it was probably one of the most scary things I've ever experienced, like being accused of being on drugs. I've never taken anything that's not prescribed by my doctor. Maybe feel like I'm the only one in my generation who didn't try something, but I wasn't on anything at all. And it was a horrible experience. So I decided, and in order to come back to Wellesley after being on medical leave, ended up being hospitalized. In order to come back to Wellesley, I would have had to have violated my privacy rights, and 6 different people in the administration who already weren't very sensitive to disability issues would have had complete access to my diagnosis, all the medications I was on, all of the files, and I felt that that was intrusive. So I transferred to Reed College, which while they were more open, the disability accommodations weren't as good. There was this sort of ableism, kind of across the board, that if you were going part-time, you were seen as, somebody told me, enjoy your leisurely stroll through Reed. And I seriously, it's not leisurely if you are going part-time, and you're dealing with disability issues. But thankfully, my trajectory struggled a bit at first, but thankfully, my trajectory was upward, and got a better doctor, and found that my academics improved, things were on an upward trajectory. And then, I didn't really know what I wanted to do after I graduated. I had no idea. I thought of doing journalism. That was what was recommended to me by my thesis advisor. Thought of doing a lot of different things, kind of sputtered around for a few years, studied, did some private instruction in classics and Latin. And then I got involved in the Bernie Sanders campaign, and that's where it kind of started, where I was in sort of an activist milieu. And I from that point, I was really, at first I was really inspired by Bernie Sanders and everything he stood for, and I decided to involve myself in disability politics, because I heard that our state Democratic Party had a disability caucus. And unfortunately, my experiences as a disability rights activist in the Democratic Party and in progressive politics, for all they say about how quote unquote woke and open they are, it just isn't true. The moment you announce that you're disabled, they say, we want to be open, inclusive, woke, whatever you want to call it. But that's not been my experience at all. My experience has been more that that it's sort of a feel good thing, but to really do the work to dismantle systems of oppression, I feel like a lot of it's tokenism. And so I'm not, to make a long story short, I'm not really involved in the Democratic Party anymore. And I'm not as much involved in progressive politics, but I am involved in doing a lot of writing. And I feel like in writing, I can express myself and sort of not be impeded by this really fake, woke, just activist milieu that is, I feel like, in a lot of senses, counterproductive. And I felt like the disability caucus I was a part of was there to say, we have a disability caucus, and not to really change the structures of the organizations or the Democratic Party. And as soon as you declare you're disabled, they say, they have, low expectations for you, and that's disappointing. So I really enjoy writing about my experiences. I enjoy also telling the stories of others. I just wrote a piece on Joshua Collins, who is an autistic truck driver who's running to be the first openly autistic Congress member. And so I enjoy telling other people's stories. I enjoy writing about disability issues, and I enjoy learning. So I've thought of, going back to school at this point, doing much better than I was a few years ago. So that's basically my journey. Thanks.
Yeah, well, just to follow up, because you hit on a couple different points that I wanted to mention and talk about, ableism, and then some of your writings. When it comes to ableism, what exactly, can you just give a definition so that everyone understands what you're referring to when you say ableism?
Ableism is discrimination and negative treatment and attitudes about people with disabilities.
Okay. And you are, part of your trajectory included experiencing your own sets of ableism from different people, including the Democratic Party, you're saying.
Yeah, from the Democratic Party and from progressive activist circles, I found them to be very ableist and not really interested in truly learning so much as, and a lot of paternalism. I had one experience where this lady who led a single payer group, she would basically mommy over me, and it was just we'd be at parties, and I didn't realize what she was doing at first, but she was basically telling me, here's your food, and almost taking care of me. But the more I look back at that, I'm like, that is so wrong. I didn't need anybody to take care of me at parties. I just needed to, be treated like a human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And just speaking on your writings, one of the recent ones that is of particular interest because of what's going on right now is about COVID-19. And you wrote how America's COVID-19 response is exposing systemic ableism. And just to quote you, because I just thought it was really interesting, you wrote, that few bat an eye when health history is one of the main criteria for denying care in hospitals across the country is even more evidence of ableism in our healthcare system. Could you just expand upon that a little bit more?
Yeah, there is a lot of ableism in the healthcare industry itself, and it's something that's led me to not want to pursue healthcare, um, like getting healthcare myself, beyond a few trusted doctors, and even they have committed ableist transgressions. I had one of them saying, I was sick with either COVID or pneumonia back in March, and March 2nd, my family was out of town for their 45th anniversary. So March 2nd, their anniversary, I was running a 101.4 fever. And my psychiatrist, when I told her that, she told me, I think this is a good experience for you.
Hmm.
And it's just like a good experience because I'm out of town alone. I mean, I'd been alone before, but out of town alone, sick, and this is a good experience.
Right.
I called an ambulance for because I was short of breath and I have asthma, and this is a good experience. And I called her on it, and it's just like she didn't have any good answers. Or when I went to, and the system, the healthcare system sees disabled bodies as sort of an acceptable loss, and the Trump administration even had to issue a memorandum that disabled people are worthy of care, and they can't discriminate in their triaging systems against disabled people, but or else, you can seek remedy from the Department of Justice. The problem is that I read that it happened in Arizona. I'm not recalling the person's name, but that somebody already died because of this sort of rationing of care based on disability, and that our lives don't seem to be as much of as much value as non-disabled people, is something that's really striking and troubling for me, at least.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I thought the same thing. The fact that there was this whole debate going on in the hospitals as to whose life is more valuable, and then placing some sort of, decision making upon that, which then disproportionately began to affect people with disabilities to the point to where, yes, as you said, the administration had to make an announcement, um, letting people know that that's totally inappropriate. I thought I felt the same way. I thought it was pretty alarming that we even were at that point in our healthcare system. Um, so you also talked about in the past confronting your own ableism or attitude that you had, and you wrote about it in of an experience that you had in a prior relationship. And I just thought it was funny in one aspect that you talked about, oh, where was it? Where you mentioned, oh, in broken syntax, he would proclaim, that we were best friends and such. And I just thought it was kind of funny when you wrote the in broken syntax aspect of it, because it's kind of, it reminded me of that saying or joke, if you're going to insult me, at least insult me appropriately or grammatically correct or whatever. And so I just thought it was, kind of cheeky that you wrote in there that in broken syntax, this is what was going on. But well, I guess first, how long were you in that relationship? How long ago was that? And then what ultimately made you realize, were you in the relationship when you realized that you were developing this ableism attitude, or was it after the relationship? Or
Well, yeah, he was a friend of mine, and it was somebody who I had invited to all kinds of events, and he wanted to actually once ask me if I had like romantic feelings for him, which I found bizarre, but I felt like I was just trying to be a friend and trying to help him, but I felt like that it was afterward I thought, geez, I noticed how much ableism that I had experienced from other disabled people, especially in that same group. And then I'm realizing, geez, I have those same attitudes myself toward people with some intellectual disabilities. And I feel like I need to check those. I feel like we need to like be checking our attitudes for some of the ways that internalized ableism impacts us, just like we check our attitudes to realize that in systems of oppression that we may have been furthering racism and not even realizing it. So I think that it's important to check our attitudes and to think about in that situation, to think about that, yeah, I was being ableist in my attitudes toward him, and that I wasn't thinking that, yeah, he could even be calling me his best friend for political ends, and that he could have been manipulating me, which I think he was manipulating me in that writing, that he was saying we were best friends because I was in a position of power over him, and I think he wanted to ingratiate himself to me.
yeah, yeah. And just kind of speaking on your writings, the writings are, she's a very prolific writer on the website themighty.com, which is where
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting some of your articles from. I can assume or imagine that the response has been pretty positive. I mean, can you speak on the response from the community? Has it been all over the place, up and down, or pretty supportive?
Well,
Especially
it's
when
been
you're calling
most
out what is, when you've been calling out ableism within the community itself. I'm just wondering what was that response like, especially?
well, I didn't really get that much of a response to when I called out ableism in the disability community. That wasn't one of the articles that were read the most, and my response has been mixed. I've got a lot of people saying we really like your writing, but then there are people who have questioned the fact that I've been I've unabashedly talked about political issues on that site, and although they put a disclaimer that it was just one person's opinion, I feel like politics intersects with ableism, and I think that we should be talking about it. And I've had some questioning, why does this even belong on the Mighty? Why does this even belong here? Shouldn't we be talking about other issues? And then the people will come out and admit to me that they disagree with my politics, and it was sort of a disingenuous attack, that their problem wasn't with politics. One of them had posted that she was so appreciative of Ayanna Pressley for talking about her condition, but she posted this and then wondered why I was talking about politics on another post, and this I referenced it, and it's just like, okay, so you just don't like my politics.
Right.
It was kind of funny.
Yeah, yes. Sometimes it always does come down to the politics of it, and it can be a divisive issue. But I certainly, for one, appreciate when people just put it out there. I can interpret it or like it or not like whatever is written, but certainly the fact that you have a platform, I think, is good for all opinions to be out there. We don't have to live in what I call an echo chamber, so to speak.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about that. I feel very strongly about, giving people a voice and letting people speak and learning from each other. And, I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes too. And there's things that I've written that I'm like, okay, maybe maybe I think a little differently now, or maybe the way I wrote that wasn't the best, but I feel like to counter that, write more and speak out more, and I don't believe in silencing people.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last thing I want to talk about was your article about low expectations being a form of ableism. I have to tell you, my background, of course, is as a special education attorney, as you're aware. And I immediately, when I read that article, saw the headline and read the article, I knew exactly what my point of reference was from, because that is a big point of contention from parents and their frustrations dealing with the school districts, that they feel like their children aren't challenged, and the school, as opposed to creating an IEP that appropriately challenges them, will sort of dumb the information down or make excuses for low performance or poor performance. So I just like the fact that you put that out there in an article, that is a form of ableism, and there's no reason to have the same, to change expectations. And then you started the article out with a really good story about how someone was disrupting a meeting, and you were not willing to lower the standards of conduct, I believe, if I remember correctly, for the meeting, simply because of his disability. You felt it was just more appropriate to maybe pull him to the side and explain, this is the code of conduct, this is our standard, and you have to meet that.
Yeah, it was, the problem was that I was not the person who was ultimately in charge in that situation, and it was actually a woman, but she had a disability. And it's interesting, the person above me had a mental health disability as well, but sort of, I don't know how to describe it. She would sort of compartmentalize it, and sort of, it was like there was this cognitive dissonance, and she would just not acknowledge it, and have mental health disability too. And but I really objected to her idea that this person, I'm like, hey, I can meet standards. And learning to meet standards is about people teaching you what those standards are. And if there's no expectation of you, you're not going to learn what those standards are. And I've seen that time and time again with disabled people, is that we'll just say, we have no expectation of you. And I think one of the examples I was thinking of was the Social Security disability payee system. They'll just say, okay, you need a representative payee, but wouldn't it be better if those people who need representative payees were taught how to manage their money? Wouldn't that be a better experience, and wouldn't that help them become more independent? And I think what a lot of people want is to become independent. I really don't think people want low expectations. And I know, for being a disabled person, that I don't want low expectations. In the realms where I need accommodation, I would like an accommodation or an alternative format or something like that, but that I have no skills. And another way that this plays out in the Social Security system is, you look at there was an SSDI handbook that was like how to get back to work. And it had, I don't remember all the specific examples, but the jobs that were described were pretty menial. I know that's probably not the best term for it, but it's just like, just because you're disabled doesn't mean that that's the only task that you can perform.
Mhm.
A lot of people with disabilities are very gifted in other areas,
Yeah.
and it's like as soon as you say disability, that means there's this low expectation of you, and I think that's a darn shame.
Oh, I agree. I mean, I can just remember also having a case in the court system dealing with guardianships, and I
Hmm.
represented the sister wanted to have guardianship over her brother, and I represented the brother in his rights and was arguing completely against a guardianship because he could clearly understand what was going on. He could hold down a conversation. He was cognitive in his understanding and development. I felt strongly, what I argued to the judge was that he was raised in a house where he was just never taught how to do these things, like manage his money and manage his finances, because his mother always did everything. And now it looks as though the sister, because the mother, is close to or closer to passing away than the sister is, at least, they want to take care of it. And now the sister wants to be in charge of the decision making. But his inability to do all of this isn't because of his capacity, his mental capacity. It's just because he's never been taught how to do any of these things.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it with situations such as that is there'll be people in the family that almost will weaponize your disability and use it as a means of control, as a means of saying you can't do anything, we don't want you to do anything,
Yep.
and here's why you're incapable, and paint a very skewed picture. I know this happens in the Social Security disability system. When people are arguing that someone is disabled, they will paint the most bleak picture, omit details, because maybe they're desperate for benefits, maybe they're desperate to get health care and met, and next minute the person has a payee, next minute the person has very little independence, and really that it just can be a terrible thing. And one more thing about the Social Security system is it really disincentivizes work, and it's kind of a shame. I've known multiple people who are disabled who have not performed work that they can perform because they don't want to lose their health care benefits. And that's, kind of getting back to my healthcare justice activism. I really don't think healthcare should be tied to employment. And how many people could get off of disability and work and work if they weren't, so many people, most of the fraud that occurs on SSDI and SSI, I believe, is from people working under the table because they're so afraid of losing their benefits. And I feel like a lot of that could be solved if we had a universal healthcare system where healthcare was not tied to employment and people could receive benefits regardless. I feel like people could be free to do what they want to do work wise, and that it would be, better for everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. Well, I certainly thank you for the interview today. This has really been a great time talking to you. I love talking about this topic, ableism, because it's such an important topic that I think not enough people really know about, understand, or more importantly, appreciate. And even what it looks like, because like you said, people engage in that without even realizing it. So I think it's important to continue the conversation so that people understand when they are doing it and they become more self-aware, and it'll just only help us all in the going forward.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. You take care.
Yeah, thank you.